Well, everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the 2018 iPad Pro and kind of see how this particular iPad holds up in 2018. Now, the thing to keep in mind here for the most part is that when you're going to go through and basically pick up an iPod or an iPad, these types of devices for the most part are pretty interesting. So I definitely do think in some ways that they look very good. They look pretty modern. They look almost like what you'd expect inside of these types of devices. Even the current generation iPad Pros look pretty similar to these ones, which is actually pretty legendary. But at the same time, there might be some better options out there for you to go and pick up. So we'll take a look at those throughout this whole entire video. First things first though, if you do want to go ahead and pick up any of these iPads, links will be down in the description below. You can get them from there and you can help support the channel at the exact same time. Now, starting off with the outside of these particular iPads, the thing you have to remember is that when you're going to go through and buy an iPad like this, the design of it still looks pretty good. It's an 11-inch IPS LCD panel. It's a fairly high resolution. It's 120 Hz. And it actually looks like a pretty good iPad. The thing I love the most about these types of iPads is that you can basically go through, pick them up, and they still look and feel very, very good, which is something I love seeing. They may not be the most perfect iPads of all time, but definitely if you're about to go through and pick up an iPad, I definitely do think these are very decent options for the most part. So I will tell you from that side, again, maybe they're not necessarily perfect, but they definitely get the job done in a lot of ways. And I definitely am a big fan of the way these iPads hold up, especially from a design perspective. You're getting a USB Type-C port on the bottom, which is great. You're also able to go through and basically get Apple Pencil 2 support inside of this iPad as well. I don't know if Apple Pencil Pro supported, I kind of don't remember, but at least you're getting Apple Pencil 2. Which that is awesome. I love having Apple Pencil 2 support, and the fact that you're basically going to be getting that here in this type of device, it is going to be a very nice thing to have. So I will tell you from that side in and of itself, it is a really nice thing to basically have. So you're going to be able to go through, get this type of device, get USB-C, and basically just move on, which is something that's really cool here. Now, on top of that, another very big important thing to keep in mind here too, is that with the iPad Pro 11-inch, on the backside, you're still getting like a decent type of camera inside of this iPad as well. So this type of camera doesn't really look that bad. The device itself looks pretty decent. So those things in and of itself kind of make this device stand out just like a little bit more. So for starters, I for one, I'm a big fan of the way this iPad looks from that particular perspective. Again, maybe it's not perfect, but it still does a pretty good job at the things you're pretty much going to throw at it from that side. But there are a few other things to kind of keep in mind here too. You know, like I said before, if you're going to go through and get one of these types of iPads, the design of it looks fairly similar to the current generation of iPad, which is pretty crazy. So when you look at it, you'd actually be pretty surprised that an iPad like this can still, hold up, because it is like an older type of iPad, but you would never imagine that an iPad like this would be of this caliber, right? And that's kind of the more insane, crazy thing kind of going on here, because this iPad still does a really good job of kind of, giving us what we kind of want from it. And the build quality, the capability behind it, it's still very top tier, which is something that I love seeing. So from that side too, that kind of covers it up there as well. Now, on top of that, another very important thing to keep in mind here too, is the fact that the price tag of this iPad isn't as high as it used to be. These iPads have gone down in value so much that if you have the capability of kind of going through and picking up an iPad, these things are very much, cheaper than what they are, which is crazy again, because the build quality, it looks so good for it, being of this type of caliber and being the age that it is. So I'm personally a very big fan of the way this iPad kind of holds up from that particular perspective. Now, on top of that, another very important thing to keep in mind here too, is that when it comes down to these types of iPads, the camera on these things really aren't too bad. You're getting a 12 megapixel sensor on the backside, which really isn't too terrible. Then you're also going to be able to go through and get a 7 megapixel camera on the front. So it's actually not too bad. Like if you're able to go through and like pick up some sort of a device, you're really not going to be getting that bad of an experience here, which is something that's kind of interesting to kind of keep in mind there. So that in and of itself, I think is a pretty interesting thing. Again, it's not the perfect situation, but I would say it's not a terrible type of device either from that particular perspective. So that right there is another one of those big things to keep in mind there as well. The camera is giving you 4K at 60, like I said, so you do have that type of capability there, which is nice. The front camera only 1080p at 30. It would be nicer if we got a little bit more capability on the front side, but it's not the biggest deal in the world, but that could just be one other thing that you might run into there when it comes down to this device. So I definitely will tell you, a device like an iPad Pro, like this one, it is a pretty good option. It does look pretty good for the most part from a camera perspective. And there's even some, phones like a Galaxy A phone that just came out like not that long ago that is also basically giving you kind of like a similar type of, it doesn't even give you 4K at 60 on the back. So in some ways, this iPad still does a pretty good job from that particular side. So I do think that is kind of a nice thing that's going on with this type of device when it comes down to it. So from that side, that kind of covers it up there as well. Now, when it comes down to software support, these iPads are still supported with software, which is amazing. We're not really too sure how long these things are necessarily going to last. I hope they end up lasting for a much longer period of time. I probably will say they might end up getting iPadOS 19, considering the iPhone XS is still supported. And even if that one doesn't get supported with software anymore, I think there is still a very high likelihood where something like an iPhone XS could possibly go through and get iOS 19, and there still could be a chance where an iPhone, or an iPad Pro like this could end up getting that software update as well. So we're just going to have to kind of wait and see what happens with that. But if I had to kind of guess, that would kind of be my first guess for the most part. So from that side too, this iPad does do a pretty good job of kind of giving us some more capability when it comes down to it from that side as well. Now, when it comes down to its battery life, it actually is still giving me pretty decent type of battery, which in and of itself is kind of surprising because you probably wouldn't expect this thing to still be holding up quite well when it comes down to that battery department. So I would probably tell you from that side too, this type of device does actually do a pretty good job from the battery department from that side. Again, maybe it's not the most perfect situation of all time, but it still kind of holds up fairly well from that particular side. So I would tell you that that is kind of one of those big things and big key areas to kind of keep in mind there from that side as well. Now, when it comes down to the performance, this device is giving you the Apple A12X chip inside of it, and it's basically giving you 4 gigabytes of RAM up to 6 gigs of RAM on some models. So that right there is also a pretty cool thing to kind of keep in mind there as well, because you're able to go through and you're still able to go through and get like a pretty good performing iPad that really, it's not the most expensive iPad of all time, but I still pick up my iPad Pro, like this 2018 model. It's my newest iPad that I still own, and I still have a really decent experience with this type of iPad. Like, it really isn't that bad. And I do think this in and of itself, it is a very important thing to keep in mind, because you're able to go through and still pick up an iPad like this and not really have to worry about these iPads, being like a terrible experience or a terrible anything, because it still is going to be, giving us a pretty good experience when it comes down to it from that side. So overall, to kind of sum up this whole entire video, what I'll definitely tell you is that for me personally, I'm a big fan of these iPads, right? I was a big fan of these iPads when they first came out. I just don't know if these iPad Pros would necessarily be the first iPads I would recommend anyone to buy anymore. I think there are better options out there for you to go and pick up. So, I think of an iPad, like an M1 iPad Air, for example. That iPad is kind of better than these iPads in some ways. Also, if you take a look at some other iPads too, like there's some better options out there. And I think that is just one of those big key takeaway areas, because you can go through and basically pick up an iPad like these ones and still get a really good experience. So I think if you're on a budget, then this one makes a lot of sense to go and buy, because they're very, very good options. But I do think there's kind of some better ones out there that might be better for you to go and pick up rather than these ones. So from that side too, that kind of covers it up there for the most part. If you have any other thoughts or questions, please let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that will mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.